Welcome to Snail Story, where love stories unfold slowly, deeply, and with a healing touch, told straight from the heart. How are you today? Are you perhaps searching for something gentle amidst all the everyday noise? Today's story introduces you too, Renato, a single father who once worked as an invisible gardener, and Alexis, a cold, composed CEO navigating the fine line between power and loneliness. An anonymous email, a hallway conversation, a handkerchief, and a little boy named Ben who connected to seemingly distant souls. They didn't just learn how to trust, they learned how to love and to be loved in ways no one ever teaches. Can you allow someone who's lived in the shadows ever be worthy of stepping into the light of a leader? And can someone strong enough to never break ever admit they long for a place to call home? Stay with us until the very end, and if your heart stirs even a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Snail Story with anyone who might be craving a gentle moment today. That morning in Seattle was shrouded in a thin mist, making the skyscrapers look as though they were floating among the clouds. On the top floor of Glassleaf Tower, Building 118, a high-stakes meeting was about to begin, not just a typical negotiation, but one that could determine the future of an entire company. Alexis Morgan stepped out of the elevator, her heels striking the marble floor like a drumbeat against her own chest. The morning light caught the edge of her cream blazer, casting her in a glow that made her look both sharp and distant. Exactly the image of a CEO who can't afford to be wrong. Press had painted her to be. She was used to mornings like this. Mornings where one mistake in a contract could cost hundreds of people their jobs. But today, something unsettled her more than usual. Prep the meeting room. Check the lighting, sound, and notify the interpreter the meeting starts exactly at 9, she said quickly to her assistant, eyes glued to the stock ticker on her phone screen. Alexis, the assistant's voice was soft. "We have a problem." She stopped and looked up. "Don't tell me Mr. Yamada arrived early, but the interpreter, Mrs. Keiko, is stuck at Tokyo Airport. Her connecting flight was canceled due to the storm. No one in Seattle can make it in time. All translation agencies have declined. It's too short notice." A heavy silence fell over the gleaming hallway. Alexis said nothing. She simply closed her eyes. 1 second, 2, 3. A deal worth $70 million, 2 years of negotiation mails, Zoom calls, handwritten letters, and carefully orchestrated dinners in Kyoto. One misstep, one wrong word could offend Mr. Yamada, and he would quietly return to Japan, taking the deal with him. "I'll go meet him," she said, her voice tight. "Just tell me he's still sipping tea and hasn't walked out yet." Actually, the assistant hesitated. He's speaking in Japanese with his advisors. They don't look pleased. 7 floors below, in the western vertical garden of the building, a man in a faded blue shirt was watering the plants. Morning sunlight streamed through the ferns and fell gently on his graying hair. Renato Reyes had worked here as a groundskeeper for almost a year. Few people knew his name. Most just called him the gardener or grounds guy, or worse, didn't call him anything at all. But to him, every lavender bloom, every old rosebush lining the balcony had a name. He loved this job, not because of the minimum wage, but because it helped him hold on to a part of himself, the part that once taught Japanese culture at the University of Manila. A life long gone now. From above, a loud noise echoed down. Renato looked up. A piece of glass fell and shattered near his feet, narrowly missing him. He flinched, but quickly realized it was a Japanese teacup. An expensive one. Then came the sound of an angry voice spoken in Japanese drifting down from a newly opened window. "This is an insult. No interpreter. It's offensive." Renato held his breath, not out of fear, but because he understood every word. Upstairs, Alexis entered the conference room just as Mr. Yamada rose from his seat. His eyes were cold as steel, slicing through her as if she weren't even there. One of his advisors was already pulling a small suitcase toward the door. "Mr. Yamada," she began, "we sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. We're trying to find a solution." He shook his head and replied in Japanese. Alexis didn't understand the words, but she felt that everything was slipping away. She had never felt failure this close. Renato didn't know why his feet started moving. He just knew that, moments later, he was standing outside the glass conference. Doors stopped by security. "Just 1 minute," he said. "You're not allowed in." "Your maintenance? This doesn't concern you." "I speak Japanese," Renato replied, eyes locked on the image of the woman inside, her posture crumbling beneath invisible weight. "Come again. I can interpret for them. And if no one does something right now, that man will be on a plane back to Tokyo this morning." At that very moment, Alexis heard the door open. A figure appeared, the gardener. Her assistant gasped. The Japanese advisors looked confused. And before anyone could stop him, Renato bowed deeply and spoke in fluent, respectful Japanese. "Please wait. Give us a chance to clear up this misunderstanding, Mr." Yamada froze. The room fell into silence. Everyone turned to look at the man in the worn shirt. Someone who had been invisible now, suddenly, the center of it all. Alexis stood still, stunned. Who was he? And how could a gardener bow with perfect form, speak with flawless tone, and save the empire she had just nearly lost? The air in the conference room hung still after the gardener's greeting. Renato bowed with such precision that even the Japanese advisorsmen, well-versed in international dealings, cast his glances. Mr. Yamada, who had clearly been moments away from walking out, slowly sat back down. The steely expression on his face gave way to something else: curiosity. Alexis stood frozen, trying to comprehend what had just happened. All she knew was that the meeting, seconds from collapse, had been pulled back from the edge. Not by her, not by her advisors, but by a man she hadn't even noticed before. "Renato, right?" she asked softly. He nodded, still keeping his head slightly bowed. "May I continue?" he said. She nodded. What else was there to lose? Renato stepped forward. His voice was deep, steady, not overly confident, but composed enough to hold the room. Speaking in slow, deliberate Japanese, he explained the situation, apologized on behalf of Sterling Architecture, and conveyed that Alexis Morgan would personally present the proposal. After a short pause, Mr. Yamada replied in Japanese's tone noticeably softer. Renato turned to Alexis. "He says he's impressed by our humility, and he's willing to listen as long as the presentation reflects a deep understanding of Japanese architectural culture." Alexis exhaled quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. Renato simply nodded and stepped back, standing quietly in the corner of the room like he'd returned to watering plants, not interpreting a multi-million-dollar deal. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Alexis presented in English, confident and concise. Renato translated into Japanese flawlessly, not missing a beat from technical terms to subtle cultural references. Like Ingawa, the traditional wooden veranda found in old Japanese homes, that wasn't something you learned in a language class, because he had lived in a house with an Ingawa, had shared his last meal with his father, a kanji teacher, right there on that wooden porch. After the Japanese delegation left, Alexis walked straight to the corner of the room where Renato stood, his hands clasped like a schoolboy about to be scolded. "You just saved my company," she said plainly. Renato looked at her, giving a small bow. "There was no one else, and I couldn't let all that work go to waste because of a flight delay." "So you speak Japanese?" "I used to teach Japanese language and culture at the University of Manila." "Then why are you?" She glanced at the gardener's uniform, her voice catching here. Renato paused, then answered gently, Because the U.S. doesn't recognize my degree. Because when I first arrived, I had no legal work papers. And because my son needed food, shelter, and a father. His voice held no bitterness. He was simply telling a story. That afternoon, building buzzed with whispers. The same security guard who had blocked Renato at the door now gave him a timid nod. Young architects murmured, "Who is that guy? He speaks Japanese like he's native." Alexis's assistant kept glancing after him as if seeing him for the first time, but Renato paid no attention. He just wanted to go home. His home was a small rented apartment on the city's south side, almost an hour by bus from the glass leaf. Building the front door was old and chipped, the paint peeling but inside. It was tidy and peaceful. Ben, his son, was sitting on the living room floor, tently piecing together a cardboard airplane model. "Papa's home," the boy exclaimed, running up to hug his father's legs. Renato smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Do you know what Papa did today?" "Cut the grass on the fifth-floor garden," Ben guessed. Double quotes, "No. Papa talked to Japanese people." Ben's eyes widened. "Really?" In Japanese, Renato nodded. Papa still remembers. And maybe because of that, someone finally noticed Papa. The boy grinned. Then, in a small voice, he asked, "Does that mean you can be a professor again, like in the Philippines?" Renato froze. He looked into his son's eyes, so full of innocence and yet so hopeful, and he didn't know what to say. That night, on the 20th floor of the company headquarters, Alexis still hadn't gone home. Her laptop screen displayed a rising stock ticker, perhaps in response to rumors about the successful meeting with the Japanese investors. But her mind wasn't on the numbers. She was watching internal security. Footage of Renato stepping into the conference room, bowing with perfect Japanese form. His voice calm and precise. She had never seen anyone do something like that with such quiet sincerity. Alexis Morgan, who had endured hundreds of high-stakes negotiations, faced countless arrogant and polished figures, found herself moved by a gardener, not because of his skill, but because of the respect in every word he spoke. She opened her email and typed into the recipient line, "Renato Reyes at gardenstaff.glassleaf.com, subject. Meet me tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. Room 204. Message. You saved the meeting. Now, I'd like to speak with you about a different role. Sincerely, Alexis Morgan." The small conference room on the second floor of Glassleaf was unusually quiet that morning. Renato sat upright. The shirt he wore today was cleaner than usual, though still second-hand. He didn't have a suit, no tie, and certainly no trace of expensive cologne on his wrist. Just the scent of mint from his toothpaste, and the faint aroma of herbs that lingered on his fingers from tending plants that morning. The door opened. Alexis Morgan walked in. Today, she wore a simple white shirt with pale gray trim, the top button undone. Her hair was tied low, fastened with a small black clip. No red lipstick, no power blazer. In her hand was a slim folder. "Good morning, Renato," she said. "Thank you for coming." Renato nodded. He didn't know what else to do except sit still and wait. First, Alexis began, her tone softer than usual. "I want you to know, I didn't invite you here just to say thank you. I owe you that, yes. But this isn't some office appreciation ritual." "Yes, ma'am," Renato replied quietly. Second, she opened the folder. "I want to talk to you about a job." She slid a paper toward him. It was a job description, printed on thick, cream-colored paper with the company logo in the corner. Position, Interim Cultural Communication Advisor, International Development Division. Renato furrowed his brows. "I don't understand." "We're expanding into Asian and European markets," Alexis explained. "And we need someone who understands culture, language, who can interpret, but more than that, Someone who can read people before they even speak. Renato paused. That was something he had always believed he could do. Not because of degrees, but because of years spent being a father, a husband, a professor, and an invisible immigrant. You'll have a 1-month trial, Alexis continued. The pay will be 3 times what you're earning now, and we can offer a part-time schedule so you can still care for your son. Renato opened his mouth to say something, but went silent. He wasn't used to receiving opportunity. When he left the meeting, his heart was pounding in a strange way. It didn't feel like bad news. It wasn't like the moment a shard of glass had nearly struck him last week. This was something else, like opening a door he hadn't dared to touch in years. He hurried outside, hands trembling as he dialed his phone. Ben didn't pick up Renato. Took the bus home as usual, but when he reached the corner of his street, something felt wrong. The apartment door was slightly ajar. Ben's little backpack lay abandoned on the porch, and the door which Renato had always told him to lock from the inside was quivering in the breeze, like someone had just left in a hurry. He ran inside. Ben, he called out, no answer. The living room was empty. Toys still scattered on the floor. A half-eaten bowl of instant noodles sat on the table. In the small bedroom, the bedding was rumpled, but there was no one there. Renato grabbed his phone and called over and over again. Still no answer. Then a faint ring echoed. It was Ben's phone, forgotten in his pajama pocket. Renato rushed downstairs, asking neighbors. No one had seen anything unusual. He called the police. They told him to come file a report in 2 hours. Children under 12 usually just wander off, but Ben never wandered. He never left without telling his father. Never forgot his backpack. Never left the door open. Renato felt like someone had reached inside his chest and crushed his lungs back inside the apartment. He tore through drawers. In a small one, beneath the English workbook Ben loved, he found a crumpled note. If you want your son safe, stop speaking your foreign languages to anyone. Renato's hands shook. He collapsed to the floor. Someone knew about the meeting yesterday, about him stepping out of the shadows, about him daring to stand up in a tower full of powerful people. And now, his son was being used as leverage. His phone rang. No caller ID. He picked up. Silent. A gruff man's voice came through, intentionally distorted. I don't care where you used to teach. Round here, you're the gardener. Stay in your place. Click. The call ended. Renato stared at the screen. His chest rose and fell, not out of fear, but from a deep, burning anger that had never fully surfaced until now. He would not stay silent anymore. Not for them, not for fear, but for Ben and for himself. That afternoon, the 20th floor office of Sterling Architecture was quieter than usual. Alexis Morgan checked the time for the 4th time in just 10 minutes. Renato hadn't shown up for his scheduled meeting, and he hadn't messaged. It was entirely unlike the impression she had of him. Punctual, reserved, and deeply respectful of every small opportunity. Should I try calling him again? Jennifer, her assistant, asked gently. Alexis hesitated. Let's wait a few more minutes. She didn't know why she felt so uneasy. An hour later, while Alexis was on a video call with the finance department, a front desk intercom call came through. There's a man a bit odd in the lobby. He didn't give his name, but says he needs to see you. He looks urgent, and he has a child with him. A child. Alexis repeated. Her heart skipped. She immediately excused herself from the meeting, grabbed her purse, and headed to the elevator. A familiar image flashed through her mind-brown eyes. Slightly messy hair, a small voice saying, Papa speaks the best Japanese in the world. The elevator doors opened in the lobby. Renato stood there, holding Ben tightly in his arms. The boy clung to his father's collar. A faint bruise marked his cheek. His eyes were swollen from crying. His school uniform was crumpled, and his sneakers were torn at the straps. Alexis rushed over. What happened? Renato didn't speak. He simply handed her the crumpled note, the same warning he had found the day before. She read it once, then again. Her face darkened. Did you report this to the police? They told me to wait. They think it's just a case of a kid wandering off. But I know it's a message, for me and for you. Alexis clenched the paper tightly in her hand. And I don't think this is just about discrimination, Renato said slowly. He looked directly into her eyes. This is a warning for anyone who dares to step out of their place. Alexis brought Renato and Ben up to her private office. She made tea for Renato, poured warm milk for Ben as if it were something she'd done all her life. The boy sat quietly, curled on the large sofa, his eyes never leaving his father as if he were the last pillar keeping the world upright. Renato, she said once they were alone, I don't want you to be silent. I don't want you to return to the garden. And I absolutely don't want to see you leave this place out of fear. Renato looked at her, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. You don't understand. They can do anything. I have no status, no power. I'm just an immigrant who lost his wife, who swept leaves for a living, who hid his doctorate in a drawer because I was afraid people would mock me. But you have something they don't, Alexis interrupted. You have real talent. You have a child who loves you unconditionally. And you have me? Renato frowned slightly. What do you mean? She stood, pulling out her phone. I mean, I'm about to do something the board will probably hate me for, and I don't care. That afternoon, an internal announcement was sent to all Sterling Architecture employees, effective tomorrow. Mr. Renato Reyes, formerly with the garden maintenance team, will serve as interim cultural communication advisor. International Development Division. For questions or feedback, contact the CEO's office directly. Alexis Morgan. The 10th floor, where most mid-level managers worked, buzzed with tension. A wave of anonymous emails began circulating, filled with rumors. Is Morgan trying to score PR points with an immigrant story? Another tear-jerking distraction to cover up last quarter's losses. The gardeners now equal to our language director. But Alexis didn't respond. She sent just one private message to Jennifer. Have a private investigator check yesterday's camera footage near the south side. Find out who accessed Renato's apartment. Don't let the police handle this alone. She knew this was no longer a small matter. That evening, after the cleaning staff had left, Alexis stood alone at the tall glass windows of her office. The city lights reflected in her tired eyes. In her hand was a photo freshly printed from Jennifer's email, a man in a suit and sunglasses, walking out of the elevator at Renato's building at 10:27 a.m. the day before. No ID, no license plate, but Alexis had a gut feeling that never failed. This man was no stranger. Elsewhere in the building, Renato pulled a blanket over Ben. The boy had fallen asleep on the employee lounge sofa. Under the soft, yellow light, Renato quietly watched his son's face. And in that moment, he understood. He could no longer return to being the invisible gardener, not because of pride, but because they, the ones in the shadows, weren't going to stop Monday morning. The entire glass-leaf building operated under an unusual hush. Rumors of a gardener's meteoric promotion to cultural advisor had spread across every floor, from architecture studios to PR offices. In the elevator, people no longer spoke loudly. Instead, there were exchanged glances, sidelong looks filled with skepticism, condescension, and curiosity. Renato stood among them, clutching an old briefcase, wearing a crisply ironed shirt. He didn't meet anyone's gaze, but he heard everything. Must be some PR stunt. Morgan's always had a flair for drama. Once again, feelings win over logic. At the same time, behind a closed-door meeting on the 15th floor, meeting that never appeared on the company calendar, for people sat around a gleaming walnut table. One of them was Derek Sloan, Executive Vice President, and once considered the natural successor to Alexis if she ever moved into tech investment. Derek folded his arms, lips curling into a cold smile. "She's overstepping," he said. Gardner promoted to advisor after a single meeting. No resume, no security clearance, no credential verification. Miranda Hall, head of finance, a blonde woman with sharp nails, tapped her finger against the table. "He doesn't even have a U.S. degree." The youngest at the table, the legal affairs officer, remained silent, but his eyes betrayed concern. What if she's right and the man actually is as capable as the rumors say? Derek scoffed. "So what? This isn't about competence, it's about protocol. A CEO doesn't just pull a nobody into strategic leadership without board approval. No one allowed that, and I'll make sure it doesn't continue." Upstairs, Alexis received an anonymous email. No subject, no signature. Just one video file attached. She clicked security footage from the hallway. Near Renato's apartment, but from an angle higher than a typical residential system, as if it didn't come from a tenant setup. In the video, a tall man wearing sunglasses and a cap, the same man who appeared when Ben went missing, was opening the apartment door with a keycard. Alexis froze. Not a standard resident keycard. A technical access badge, the kind issued to Sterling Group maintenance staff for internal property sites. She zoomed in. Clear as day on the man's sleeve, the logo of Sterling Property and Asset Group, a subsidiary managing the conglomerate's internal real estate. Alexis exhaled slowly, spine tingling. This man was internal. "We have a problem," she told Renato. When he arrived in her office later that day, Renato set down his briefcase. Still worn out from his first strategy meeting where he had been grilled endlessly about his translation credentials, foreign degrees, and his professional adaptability. "Who do you think it is?" Alexis paused. For a moment, someone with the power to dispatch maintenance to residential properties. Someone with enough influence to bypass surveillance. And someone with a motive to undermine me in front of the board. Derek Sloan, Renato said. She nodded. "I blocked him last year from using our reserve funds to buy a chain of interior design firms. He remembers things like that." Renato frowned. "But why use my son to threaten us?" "'Cause I listed myself as a secondary emergency contact on Ben's file. They're sending me a message reminding me I've stepped into their danger." So, that night, Alexis sent a priority request to the IT security division. Retrieve the full access log of all badge entries from the building's internal management system. Reason: urgent. Priority code: Morgan 01. She knew she was walking a thin line. One wrong move, and the board could use it to strip her of her CEO role. But if she did nothing, Renato and his son would remain vulnerable targets. 2 days later, Jennifer, Alexis's personal assistant, knocked on her office door with a grim expression. "You need to see this." She placed a printed report on the desk, the full access data from the badge system. A card was used to access Renato's apartment building on the exact date and time of the incident. It belonged to a temporary maintenance employee. But Jennifer lowered her voice. That badge was registered by Derek Sloan himself. Alexis tightened her grip on the chair. That afternoon, she convened an emergency internal meeting but did not invite Derek. In a calm but unwavering tone, Alexis addressed the room. "I have evidence that a member of our executive leadership deliberately compromised internal integrity by misusing technical access privileges to approach an employee and their family without authorization." The room fell silent. "We are forwarding the case to an independent legal firm," she continued, her eyes fixed on the screen where an image of Derek's badge was displayed. "And starting today, I'd like to officially announce Renato Reyes will serve as Director of International Cultural Integration and as an official member of Sterling's Global Strategy Council." Somewhere in a shadowed office within the building, Derek Sloan clenched his fists, but he said nothing. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typed a single message, and hit send. She's declared war. Initiate Plan B. 3 days after Alexis publicly appointed Renato as Director of International Cultural Integration, an explosive article hit the news. Sterling Architecture hires a fake professor. Academic records of Renato Reyes unverifiable. The headline from Business Deep Fuel. A media outlet backed by rival conglomerates. The article cited an independent investigator, claiming that no university in the Philippines could verify ever granting a teaching credential to Renato Reyes. The comments came quickly. Touching PR story was just a smokescreen. This is why background checks matter. CEO Morgan owes us answers. Alexis read the article at 5:45 a.m., still sitting by the window ledge, her coffee cold in her hand. She wasn't surprised. She knew Derek Sloan had just thrown his first punch by 8 a.m. An internal meeting was underway and tense. Board member Mrs. Howard spoke up first. Alexis, I'll be frank. What you're doing could seriously jeopardize shareholder confidence if the media keeps pushing this. Credentials are a basic requirement, another added. We can't keep a director who can't verify his own resume. Alexis remained composed. I'm contacting the university directly. The delay may be due to records being digitized. Late, but I'll take full responsibility. Your personal responsibility won't save the company from a trust crisis. Meanwhile, Renato sat quietly in his small office. Reading the comments below the article, he wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. Just tired. Tired of a life that always seemed to follow the same cycle. Step into the light and get dragged. Back down, he looked out the window, where early morning sun glinted off the glass towers. And one question stayed in his mind. Was this fight still worth it? Ben was brought to the office that day. Alexis didn't want the boy left home alone during such a tense time. He sat in the break room, drawing silently as usual. But when he saw his father walk by as quiet like a still lake, he ran after him. Papa Renato bent down with a smile, but it was only half real. I know already, Ben said in a small voice. People are saying mean things about you online. Renato froze. Ben patted his father's hand. I don't believe them. I remember the yellow library in Manila, the cat named Mochi that always jumped on your desk during online classes. Renato stiffened. You remember that? Ben nodded. You used to teach Japanese to the lady with the red kimono. I remember you asked me to bring her water once, and I spilled it. His voice trailed off. But Renato stood frozen, because it was true. A Japanese student named Eiko had once studied with him online. And that yellow library was a quiet corner at the University of Manila where he used to work. Details no one could have made up. That afternoon, Alexis received an email from the University of Manila. This time, from the university president himself. We apologize for the delayed response. Mr. Renato Reyes does exist in our records, but under his full birth name, Renatilio Mendoza Reyes. He taught in the Department of Japanese Language and Culture from 2009 to 2015. We are ready to provide formal verification upon request. Alexis smiled relieved, but with a glint of steel. Now, it was her turn to strike. The next day, Sterling Architecture released an official statement after formal verification. Mr. Renato Reyes, Director of International Cultural Integrations, a former lecturer at the University of Manila and the author of academic work in cross-cultural communication. Recent rumors are factually incorrect and appear to be intentionally defamatory. The media pivoted immediately. Several outlets that had run accusatory headlines rushed to delete them. Business Deep File went silent, offering no response. And inside the office, the morning board meeting turned into a stunning reversal. One member said, I have to admit, this man has made me rethink many things. About trust and about bias. Derek Sloan was absent. Alexis didn't mention his name. But in her eyes, there was a quiet, unmistakable look of victory. That afternoon, Renato took Ben to the rooftop garden where lavender still grew in the flower beds he once tended. The boy darted around, laughing as if no rumor or threat had ever touched his childhood. Alexis appeared, holding 2 strawberry smoothies. "For my 2 superheroes," Ju said. Ben beamed and took one. Renato said nothing. He simply looked at her for a long, quiet moment, and for the first time since losing his wife, he no longer felt alone. The media storm had quieted for now. But inside Alexis, peace was still a far-off illusion. She knew when someone like Derek Sloan went silent. It meant only one thing. He was preparing a strike. One that would be darker, deeper, and harder to fight. Wednesday afternoon, she was reviewing final approvals for an architecture project in Kyoto when Jennifer burst in, her face pale. "You need to see this." She handed Alexis a phone. On the screen was an audio clip, no known source, but it had been distributed to nearly every senior executive in the company. The first voice, a man's, spoke in English. "Does Morgan really think she can hold on to this position forever? One more misstep, and she crumbles." Then came a woman's voice identical to Alexis's. "As long as I keep my shares, I don't care who falls." The recording ended with a faint chuckle, cold as steel. Alexis froze. She had never said those words. But the voice, the tone, the husky lilt at the end of each phrase, it was unmistakably hers. Jennifer exhaled. "The content is absurd." But with today's deepfake voice tech, even forensic software can be fooled. Alexa sat down, drained of color. If they couldn't disprove this, people would believe she was colluding more, using Renato as a PR pawn. That evening, in a small office, Renato was teaching Ben how to build a paper model of a house when the email came in. An internal message had been forwarded to him along with the audio recording. Ben looked up at his father. "Papa, what's wrong?" Renato stood, grabbing his coat. "Stay here with Ms. Jennifer for a while. Papa needs to talk to someone." When Alexis looked up, Renato was already at her door. His eyes weren't angry, but they were cold. The kind of cold that comes when someone sees a crack in a wall they thought was solid. "You got the recording?" "2." Alexis asked. Renato nodded. Silence filled the room. On one side, a CEO who had weathered storms without flinching. On the other, a father who had placed his trust not just in her, but in her protection of his son. "You think I really said that?" Alexis asked, voice hoarse. "I want to believe you didn't," Renato said quietly. "But that, recording it, sounds so real I haven't slept." She looked at him, chest tightening. "They want you to doubt me, Renato. They know you're the last link holding me upright." He didn't reply. And that silence cut deeper than words. 2 days later, the media began reporting on internal tensions at Sterling Architecture. One industry publication even suggested the heartwarming PR story might be a cover for an unofficial alliance between the CEO and an employee. Renato noticed the shift. He was no longer included in meetings. Emails stopped seeing his name. A team of managers even canceled a bilingual session he was scheduled to interpret. The old feeling of isolation returned, like during his early years in America, wandering job to job, ignored by everyone who looked at him like a man without a story. Only this time, it came from people who had once applauded him for standing beside Alexis. That night, Ben sat drawing quietly while Renato ate instant noodles. Suddenly, the boy looked up. "Papa, yesterday I saw Mr. Derek in the big glass room." Someone was pointing a little machine at Ms. Morgan's face. "Like those sound scanners in our cartoons." Renato went still. "You're sure?" Ben nodded. "UHA. I even drew it." He pulled a paper from his backpack, a childlike sketch of a tall, skinny man clearly Derek hand, a small handheld device aimed at Alexis standing a few feet away. The drawing was crude, but the details were strangely accurate. Renato stared at the page, and in his mind, the puzzle pieces began to fit. If the audio was fake, then the only one with access, motive, and resources to create, it was Derek Sloan. The next day, Renato went to see Alexis. She was alone in the empty boardroom, afternoon light casting a warm glow across her hair. Her eyes were hollow, but still held fire. "Alexis," she looked up. "I doubted you," he said, his voice unguarded. "Because I was afraid, and because I'm too used to being betrayed." She bit her lip, unable to speak. "But my son, he's not afraid. He just sees." And he saw what grown-ups missed. He saw Derek create that recording. He handed her the child's drawing, innocent, yet damning enough to spark a full internal investigation. Alexis looked down, then let out a tired laugh. Sound part joy, part exhaustion, tears glinting at the corner of her eye. They never expected a child to be the witness. Renato nodded. "And they never expected that I would still choose to believe in you, whether that recording was real or not." The atmosphere inside Sterling Architecture had shifted once again, but this time, not because of scandal. It changed because of the quiet, unwavering return of Renato Reyes. He didn't retaliate with outrage, didn't issue a public statement, didn't hold a press conference to clear his name. Instead, he began walking between departments, initiating conversations with small teams from design planning and environmental engineering to external affairs. He never raised his voice, never argued. He simply listened and invited others to do the same. "You're the gardener, right?" a young employee asked when she saw him observing a wind model in the R&D room. Renato nodded. "I used to care for the lavender on the rooftop, but I also taught cultural interaction in tropical architecture." The young woman blinked in surprise. "And now?" she asked. "Now," Renato smiled gently, "I'm growing something else. It's called trust." In the communications office, Renato sought out the head of internal media, the same man who had once shared the fake audio in a private group. "You don't need to apologize to me," Renato began. "I understand. When people don't know someone, they're more likely to believe the worst." The man sat frozen, unable to meet his gaze. Renato continued. "But if today you see something different, if you think I'm not what the rumors claim, don't need an apology, just the right kind of silence." Then he stood and walked away, leaving behind a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. Derek Sloan heard about all of this. He scoffed. "Classic moral high ground," he muttered. "Cheap, emotional theater." Until he walked into the weekly shareholder meeting and saw Renato standing at the front, delivering a presentation not about his voice, not about his credentials, but titled simply, "Culture as a Foundation. You know best whether you've built on rock or sand." Renato didn't speak about himself. He spoke of working with partners from Japan, Italy, and Germany, of how he had diffused the smallest cultural misunderstandings, how ignoring differences had nearly sunk billion-dollar projects. He showed an email from Klaus Muller, a partner in Frankfurt. Sterling Architecture didn't just send a specialist to Europe. They sent someone who understood our heart. That's why our agreement wasn't a contract hit, was a commitment. Renato looked out across the room. "I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't study at Stanford. I come from a place full of dust and very little opportunity. But I know one thing. When you have nothing to lose, you give more of yourself for others than you ever would for your own gain." The meeting ended in applause. Not loud, not flashy, just quiet and long, like a collective nod from every heart slowly realizing we were wrong. Derek sat motionless, silent. A board member leaned over and whispered, "You picked the wrong man to start a war with." That night, Alexis's office lights were still on. Renato stepped inside, quietly. Closing the door behind him, she looked up, her eyes slightly blurred with emotion. "You just turned the board around." Renato didn't answer. He walked forward and placed a small envelope on her desk. "This is my resignation," he said softly. She froze. "Not because I'm giving up, but because I need to know. If I'm not your employee, what else could I be in your life?" Alexis stood. "You're asking a question I can't answer with a form or a title." Renato smiled this time, a hint of mischief in his voice. "Then maybe don't return the envelope. That'll be your answer." Alexis walked over slowly. She didn't hand it back. Instead, she took his hand so gently it barely felt like touch, but warm enough to heal every wound he'd carried from Manila to Seattle. The final month before the Asia Summit, the largest event Sterling architecture had ever joined, was in full swing. Renato and Alexis were like the twin tips of a spear. He led the cultural strategy team. She negotiated global partnerships. They had lunch in boardrooms, discussed strategy in moving cars, and sometimes just a glance was enough to signal what detail needed adjusting. Neither of them spoke about that evening when Alexis hadn't returned Renato's resignation envelope. But everything had changed. 1 week before the summit, Sterling was chosen as the exclusive presenter for the Humanitarian Architecture Showcase in Singapore. International media buzzed with coverage. That's when it happened again, another anonymous email. This time, it wasn't sent internally. It went straight to 3 government-level investors, with the subject line, "The questionable relationship between Sterling's CEO and a former janitor." Attached were 3 photos: Renato and Alexis standing close in a meeting room. Renato handing Alexis a handkerchief after a late-night session. A cropped photo capturing Alexis's hand resting lightly on Renato's atop the rooftop balcony. Derek Sloan had played his final card. No more attacks on credentials. No more overt smear campaigns. This was an ethical trap, a whisper of impropriety, one that could destroy the reputation of a global CEO. The advisory board called an emergency session. A senior lawyer began. "Even if this relationship is genuine, it may still constitute an abuse of power if favoritism or lack of transparency is present." Renato remained still, his expression unreadable. Alexis looked at him for the first time. A flicker of fear crossed her gaze. Not fear of losing her position, but fear of the harm this might bring to the man sitting across from her. "I'll step down from presenting in Singapore," Alexis said. Rising. The room gasped. "We're not asking you to. I'm choosing to," she cut in. "I won't let something personal, true or not, overshadow the efforts of hundreds of people." After the meeting, Renato followed her into the hallway. Her heels echoed sharply along the glass corridor. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "It'll look like we're admitting guilt." Alexis stopped and turned to him. "For you, I'd take the blame for a lifetime. I won't let you take the bullets for my choices." That night, Renato returned home late. Ben was already asleep. He opened his laptop, typed a long email, deleted it, typed again. In the end, only 2 lines remained. "I may not be the right man to stand beside her, but I'm the only one who'll never leave in when the world turns away." He hit send. The next morning, Renato walked into Alexis's office with a small USB drive. "This is the filtered internal recording from the security team," he said. "I had a technician isolate background audio from the strategic meeting. There's a voice picked up by a hidden listening device. It's Derek's." Alexis clicked play, and there it was. Let them go public. An inappropriate relationship is the fastest way to sink a CEO. Derek's voice. Clear, undeniable. That Monday morning, During the executive board meeting, Alexis played the recording. No arguments. No need for legal interpretation. Just silence. After 40 seconds, Derek Sloan was removed from the board indefinitely, suspended from all duties, had his access revoked, and his actions were turned over to legal authorities. Later, at the press conference ahead of the Singapore summit, Alexis didn't address the romantic rumors. She simply said, "We do not deny the bonds between our people, only deny turning them into weapons used to manipulate and devalue human dignity." Room erupted in applause. Renato stood backstage. He didn't need to step into the spotlight. It was enough just to see her standing there, light catching the edge of her auburn hair, and know that they had weathered the storm together. After the Singapore summit, Sterling Architecture officially entered a new era. The firm secured 4 strategic partnerships totaling tens of millions of dollars. The press called Alexis Morgan the architect of global culture. And Renato? Reyes's name appeared for the first time. In Bloomberg, the man who journeyed from the rooftop garden to international conference halls. It seemed like everything had come full circle. But just days after their return to New York, Renato did something that caught Alexis completely off guard. He submitted his resignation again. "I've gone further than I ever dreamed," Renato said calmly. "And now, maybe it's time I return to where that dream began with Ben." Alexis gripped the resignation letter in her hands, then let it fall. "I don't understand." "You do," he said gently, meeting her gaze. "You understand better than anyone. We went through the storm together, but sometimes storms blur the line between trust and emotion." She stayed silent. "I'm afraid you chose me out of gratitude," he continued. "Afraid that you protected me not out of love but duty. I don't want to live under that shadow." She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled something from her pocket, an old wooden pen, worn smooth, etched faintly with the words, "The sewer, the harvester, the keeper." "Do you remember this?" she asked. Renato's eyes widened. "That's the pen my mother used to sign her first contract in Manila. I kept it from the first time you left it on the table. I thought someday you'd need it again. When you started over." She looked up, "But now I realize the one who needs to start over isn't you." That day, Renato didn't reply. He quietly walked out of the building, taking Ben and a suitcase that hadn't been touched in years. They moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, sunlit, quiet. Ben was happy. But one afternoon, while drawing a picture of 3 people under a tree, he looked up and asked, "Papa, if Ms. Morgan is a good person, why don't you invite her to play with us anymore?" Renato froze. Ben added casually, "Or is it because you don't like her?" The question cut like a thin blade, gentle but deep. 3 days later, Alexis received a box in the mail. No return address. No name. Inside was Ben's hand-drawn sketch. A wooden house with 3 windows and 3 figures standing at the door. Scrawled across the rooftop, "Our home." Alongside it, a note from Renato. "If one day you choose to begin again, not for work, come here. Ben and I will be waiting." The following week, Sterling held its 15th anniversary gala. Stockholders, media, international guests in attendance. Alexis wore a simple black velvet dress. No diamonds, no glitter. Only a wooden pen pinned over her heart. When the MC asked if she had any regrets over the past 15 years, she smiled. "Yes, I once gave up everything to keep this company alive, including myself. But now I choose to live to protect something work could never give me. A man who stepped back so I could move forward." She left the gala early. A taxi crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. Wind swept through her hair. In her hands was Ben's, drawing a map without coordinates, but with perfect direction. When she arrived, the lights were still on. Renato sat reading. Ben asleep with his head resting on his father's lap. Alexis walked in. No knock. Renato looked up, stunned. You said if. I chose to begin not because of work. She stepped forward, kissed Ben on the forehead, and looked straight into his eyes. Then let me ask you, Renato Reyes, would you be willing to start over, not out of duty, but for me? Renato didn't answer with words. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time there was no line between their two worlds, only one home. 3 souls, and a single quiet breath shared between them. One spring morning in Brooklyn, sunlight poured through the window of a small apartment where the air smelled like toast, coffee, and a child's laughter. Ben was busy folding paper. Airplanes. Renato was digging through the bookshelf for Italian language materials. Alexis had just signed up for a language of love course without much explanation, to prepare for the Milan conference, she'd said. Eyes darting away, Renato knew she didn't need a reason. Life after leaving Sterling's high tower wasn't glamorous. Renato turned down full-time consulting offers from 3 major firms, choosing instead to teach again this time at a small community college for architecture, where most students came from immigrant families. Alexis stepped down as CEO, kept an honorary position on the board, and began working with programs supporting young female entrepreneurs. They lived slowly, but deeply, and truly. One day, Ben came home beaming. Papa, Miss Alexis. My teacher made us write about what home means. She read my paper and cried. Renato chuckled. What did you write, little man? Ben pulled them both close and unfolded a page filled with crooked, slanting words. Home is where I can sleep without worrying someone will leave in the middle of the night. Home is where someone always uses my favorite cup for warm milk even if no one says anything. Home is where someone hugs me and says nothing when I'm sad, because they know not all sadness needs words. My home is a person. Actually, 2, no 3. That night, the 3 of them sat on the rooftop, eating spaghetti. The wind was soft. A few cherry blossoms from the tree below drifted up into the air. Alexis leaned her head on Renato's shoulder. Ben dozed off. In her lap, Renato whispered, Did you ever imagine yourself being a mother? She smiled. I used to think I wasn't built for anything outside being a CEO. He brushed her hair. You're an incredible mother. And you? She said, lifting her eyes. You're home. No matter where we are, I'll always want to return to you. The following week, Renato quietly placed a small box in Alexis's drawer. Inside was a wooden ring carved from the lavender plant he once grew on the rooftop of Sterling. No diamonds, no gold, just one delicate inscription. For us, where roots begin. Alexis slid the ring onto her finger, no questions asked. From that day on, they began using the word family as if it had always belonged to them. Like breath, like sunlight, like laughter echoing from the kitchen into the bedroom. On Ben's birthday the following year, Renato had a surprise. He took Alexis and their son to a small plot of land just outside New York City, a place he'd put a down payment on to build a real wooden house. We'll grow lavender again here, he said. Alexis held his hand. Ben ran circles around them, yelling, The house with 3 windows. All 3 of us will paint it. There was no grand wedding at the end. No glittering aisle or lavish reception. Just a home literally and figuratively, where a man who once thought he wasn't enough, a woman who once believed she had to fight to be seen, and a boy who once lived without a mother's arm, scows one another, healed one another, and became the one thing no status or wealth could ever replace. A family? You don't need blood. You don't need a paper signature. You still want to come home to each other every single day. That's more than enough. You've just listened to a journey that wasn't flashy or dramatic, but one deeply honest and human. From a rooftop, where broken lives quietly collided. To a family not built by blood, but by trust and choice. The story of Renato, Alexis, and Ben is a quiet reminder that sometimes what makes us feel safest isn't wealth or power, but a pair of eyes watching over us from the kitchen to the bedroom. That love, if slow enough and true enough, will always find its way home. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. If this story warmed your heart, leave us a comment. We'd love to know what it made you feel. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Snail Story, where love may be slow, but it always stays.